guys, it's Cam from Craft & Tailored, and in this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about an uber rare Hamilton Chrono-Matic Count-Down GMT. These guys are super awesome. They're very, very rare. This is the second one that I've had in all of my collecting, and this is a superb example. So wanted to take this moment to highlight this watch, talk a little bit more about it, and share this incredible reference with you. So as always, let's get into the details. The details. So these guys are uber rare. I've only seen 3 of these ever. This is the second one that we've had, and this is a watch that has a lot going on. It's a pretty big watch. It's 48 millimeters, and there really isn't a way that I know of to track Hamilton, and I'll say Hamilton, Swiss-made Hamilton production periods down to the specific date. And if anybody does know, please drop a link or a comment in the comment section below, because I would love a better and more refined resource for tracking production periods for Hamilton watches. But this is a really interesting watch from the perspective of Hamilton is an American watch company, but in the later part of the 1960s, Hamilton and the Hamilton branding was sold, and there basically was an era in time in which Hamilton watches were no longer American, but they were really Swiss. And we saw the same thing happen with Elgin and a couple of other American watchmakers of that time period. Essentially, the watch is a chronograph date GMT world timer, which is insane to think about, but a very complicated watch, really unique and kind of interesting shape, and also the execution of the pushers, the case design, the whole thing, even the movement is really, really interesting. The Hamilton Count-Down GMT Chronomatic is a watch that is really rarely seen outside of private collections. Like I said, we've only had 2 of these, this being one of the 2, and I've only seen 3 ever surface, 2 of which now we've had in our collection here. The Chrono-Matic has a large 48 millimeter satin brush case and anodized black and red pushers. The case finishing is something that I want to talk a little bit about. The sides of the case are brushed vertically. The top of the case is almost like bead blasted or glass bead blasted. That's kind of the only way that I can describe it. It has kind of like this interesting anti-reflective finish. The first one that we had been polished at some point. This one actually retains the original finish and remains completely unpolished. So it's a really, really nice kind of, I guess you could call it almost like a case study example of what the reference should look like. The other thing that's unique, kind of in similar fashion to, let's say, like an Omega Flightmaster out of that era, and I almost think that this is kind of a competitor to the Flightmaster that Omega was producing in the late 1960s into the 1970s, but you've got these color-coded pushers and crowns that ultimately indicate different functionality. And these guys are anodized. So it's a really kind of interesting way to, I guess, provide like an on-wrist guide for functionality while color coding the basic, pushers and crowns that operate the mechanical complications of the watch. Again, similarity. I don't know why my words are hanging up. Let me have some Perrier really quick. This message is brought to you by Perrier, the unofficial official sponsor of Craft & Tailored. Perrier, if you're watching this, I drink about 15 gallons of Perrier through these tiny little cans every single day. So thank you for putting this stuff in this little tiny can for me. These color-coded pushers and crowns are kind of similar to what we would again see in the Omega Flightmaster, as the Omega Flightmasters had color coding and then also an instruction booklet that came along with a watch that would allow you to like read the color coding on the pushers to operate the watch. And I think that was maybe kind of some of the design inspiration here through Hamilton. 48 millimeter satin brush case, anodized red and black pushers. The watch features a Chrono-Matic caliber 141, which is also interesting because It's essentially a Heuer Cal 14. So really interesting caliber because it has a micro-rotor and it's got a GMT date chronograph complication. There's a lot happening in the Cal 14, and Hamilton kind of rebranded that as they basically just added a 1, so it's a 141 caliber. Essentially, that movement, so the GMT Chronomatic, if you will, was a joint development by Breitling, Heuer, and Buren, basically on being one of the first companies to produce an automatic chronograph. So the Cal 14, or in this case, the Hamilton caliber 141, again, features a micro-rotor automatic self-winding mechanism with a beat rate of 19,800. And the chronograph was named after the caliber 11, together with its caliber family, Cal 12, with a higher beat rate. Thus, the caliber 14 GMT and caliber 15 small seconds were all called the Chrono-Matic. So essentially all three companies, Breitling, Heuer, and Buren, use these movements in their watches. And, you know, Hamilton acquired Buren in 1966. So essentially this was an existing movement that got rolled into the Hamilton family of watches as a result of the Buren acquisition of 1966.
I know, we could wax on and nerd out about the acquisitions of companies and micro-rotor movements all day long, and maybe we will, because this is a watch channel, and that's what we do. We talk about micro-rotors, and we talked about movements, and we talk about other companies collaborating and consuming other companies and creating these freaking amazing things like Zenith and Movado and blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on, but we're not going to.
But that is essentially how this movement exists in this Hamilton as a joint effort between Breitling, Heuer, and Buren, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right, so let me take you through how all of the crowns and pushers work on the Chrono-Matic Count-Down GMT, because it's a bit of a beast. Okay, so this black crown up here, located at the 2 o'clock position, rotates the most outer inner rotating bezel, if you want to call it, or ring, and that allows you to operate the world time. So we've got a world timer here, which is really cool, really functional. Okay, this crown down here at the, let's call it the 4 o'clock position, which is anodized in red, allows you to operate the GMT. So this is how you would basically set your GMT time, is here with this crown. So there's essentially two bezels, and essentially there's this outer bezel or inner rotating bezel that allows you to, that is a world time, and then there's a smaller inner bezel that sits inside of that, that's basically your GMT scale. So you have world time on the outermost inner rotating bezel, then you have a GMT, and then you basically have the face and dial of the watch, which, you know, features your 2 subdials and your date complication or your date window that's recessed at the 6 o'clock position. Okay, and then additionally you have, let me just move the hand stack really quick. Then you have also your GMT. So the GMT is essentially running out on 24-hour scale with the, you know, your local time, and then you would adjust that by rotating this crown here. Okay, so what's interesting about the chronograph functionality is that we've got a 12-hour totalizer here at the 3 o'clock position and a 30-minute totalizer here at the 9 o'clock position. At the, let's call it 10 o'clock position, we've got a pusher, and then also at the, we'll call it like the 8 o'clock position. It's kind of between the 7 and the 8 because of the shape of the case. Same thing with the pusher up here. It's kind of between the 10 and 11. But we also have this pusher here. Normally when you start and stop the chronograph, you're using the top pusher to start and stop the chronograph. But in this case, it's actually flipped. So you're actually using the bottom pusher to start and stop the chronograph. And then what's interesting is the top pusher actually resets it. So it's flip-flopped, which is kind of unique and weird. The other thing too is that if you were to think about this watch, so if you were to basically flip, I'm just taking this off of this wonderful Tropic strap that I've got this guy on. But if you were to flip this around, right, meaning that the pushers would be upside down, you know, the crown also is flip-flopped. So it's kind of an interesting design, and also interesting from the perspective of the chronograph functionality and the way that you would run the start and stop and reset features on the chronograph. It's flip, flop, and reverse. So a really unique and kind of just standalone piece from not only a complication perspective, but also from a design perspective. The watch is 48 millimeters, but it actually wears very comfortably. You know, I don't feel like this is like a big 48 millimeters. It's definitely chunky, but the watch wears really nice and comfortably on the wrist. The other nice thing is that I guess you could say you kind of, if you look at the case, you have basically like these built-in crown guards here and kind of like a pusher guard, so to speak. And it kind of wears like, I was driving my car into the office this morning and this didn't really dig into the top side of my wrist. So ergonomically, the case is really well balanced and really well proportionate to the size of everything happening. There's a lot happening in here, and that's why the watch is ultimately, I think, the size that it is. This one actually sold before it hit the website. We had some people that were like commenting like, all the watches sell before, you know, and yeah, sometimes we get cool stuff in and we have a waiting list and customers that are looking for this stuff, and instead of just selling it and pushing it off into the watch collecting ether, sometimes I want to bring the stuff in and share it with you. So yeah, that's what I'm doing on this one. This one actually sold to a great customer of ours. If he's watching this video, you lucky son of a gun. These are really cool, they're really rare, and I'm also very excited that it's going to you because when I saw this watch, I said, this is a watch for that customer, and it's really cool. So I'm honored that you're adding this into your collection. Really cool watch. I'll provide a link in the description below. I'm gonna write this one up because this is a really good case study example. And I think that the history behind these types of watches and the design inspiration is also something that is worthy of taking note of. I think that in today's modern watch world, we have a lot of watch companies that are kind of like ripping each other off. And I think back in the later part of the 1960s into the 70s, due to the fact that there were all these acquisitions and due to the fact that these watch companies were trying to push the horological complication boundaries of what was known, I think that there was a true and valued partnership between those brands. For example, like Buren and Breitling and Heuer developing, you know, the cow-based movements in joint partnership, which ultimately resulted in this kind of cool stuff. So a really cool piece of history, and was just really excited to share this with you guys. So we'll provide a link in the description below so that you can check that out. As always, guys, thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not doing so already, follow us on Instagram. If you've got watch questions, we are definitely here to help. Drop us a line at info@craftandtailored.com, and I will see you guys in the next one. See you later.